Welcome to All Things Marketing, a podcast where we talk about marketing from just about every angle, from digital trends and tips to content marketing to measurement, strategies, tactics, and just about everything in between. I'm your host, Bill Threlkeld, and thanks for joining us. Most of us are familiar with the new product press release, but not nearly as many might be familiar with the positioning release, which will be the focus of this podcast. Historically, the press release has been used by companies to introduce new products and services to the media. In the recent past, this generally meant sending the release to an editor or journalist via email or the newswire. The new product orientation of a press release means that news distribution is generally dictated by the number of new products launched. Because most companies can't or don't launch new products weekly or monthly, new product press release distribution by nature is sporadic at best. Since staying top of mind with media influencers such as bloggers and editors can mean the difference between getting mentioned or not in editorial coverage such as a roundup story, it's important to create a regular cadence of information that keeps your brand top of mind with editors and influencers. So enter the positioning release. It's a document that's sent to media influencers that is written and formatted like a press release without the purpose of announcing a new product. A positioning release is used to reinforce or build awareness of the essence of your brand or product while relaying new information about your brand or product to create value and relevance. A positioning release is intended to fill in the visibility gaps that can occur between formal product news release announcements, but in such a way that it adds value to the reader. A good example of a positioning release would be one that's focused on a customer use case of your current products, leveraging the value in a customer's testimonial or endorsement of the product or service. Since staying top of mind with editorial influencers is one of the keys to consistent earned media coverage, the positioning release non-intrusively reinforces the core value proposition of your brand or product by giving the editor or blogger a compelling context as to the viability of your product to the market he or she writes about. By leveraging the value in a user's story or endorsement of the product in a positioning release, you create a connection to the viability of the product with regards to the market and as a product that is in use by customers in the market. Here's how you would go about creating a brand advocate positioning release. First, look through your customer database to find a brand advocate that you know uses and loves your product. If you don't have a formal list of these types of customers, you can also monitor your social media channels, such as Facebook or Twitter, to find customers who contribute comments to share their positive experience with your product. Next, reach out to that customer in an initial call or email to find out if they are authentically enthused about the product. Assuming they are, the next step is to schedule a brief phone interview with them. In this interview, use a list of prepared questions that highlights not only their enthusiasm for the product or brand, but also elicits comments that reinforce core branding attributes. Capture key customer comments from the interview that you can use as quotes in the positioning release. The positioning release copy could start with a paragraph about the product and its key values and its benefits. Then finish the paragraph with a quote from the customer that reinforces the value in that feature or benefit from the customer's perspective. It's important to remember that a positioning release is intended to inform and educate, not be a hard sales piece. So resist the temptation to include salespeak and hyperbole and just stick to the facts. A primary goal of the positioning release is to highlight your customer's enthusiasm for the product or brand. So use links to your website in the release to follow through on any sales opportunities created. Once you've created the release, and don't forget to get your customer's approval before any further steps, you'll need to prepare it for distribution. I recommend 2 key ways to do this, as well as 1 to avoid. First, since the positioning release is intended to influence the influencers, such as editors or bloggers, get a list of these influencers, if you don't already have it, and email it to them directly in a personalized manner. Here's a very important point about that. Editors get hundreds of emails every day, and most are either non-relevant, such as blast email pitches, or veiled sales pitches. Not only will these get ignored by these editors, but they will also get you blacklisted, diminishing the chance for any coverage down the road. Send the positioning release with a very brief introduction to the editor. It's best to include the text of the positioning release in the body of the email. Note that it's considered a PR best practice to avoid sending email attachments in general unless the editor has asked for it. It's also a best practice not to send a follow-up email to the editor to find out if they got the release. There are 2 digital PR practices I use to help gain insight into whether or not an editor has taken an interest in your release. You can use an email service such as Drip or MailChimp to send the email. Both of these services offer back-end analytics that indicate if the email has been opened or not and how many times it may have been opened. A second digital PR approach to analytics is to use Bitly for any links in the release. A Bitly link will track clicks on a link in the email, which also tells you whether or not an editor has taken an interest. You can generally assume that if a link was clicked, there was a level of interest that triggered the action. Another way to leverage the visibility and value of the release is to put it on your website, whether in the form of a blog post or a dedicated link from a press area of your site. This is always a good step to take with any release, press release or positioning release, as it helps with SEO because the Google indexing process likes to see content updated on the website regularly, and all the better if that content is deemed relevant by Google, meaning it has contextual value to the products or services you sell. Finally, the one step to avoid. I recommend that you avoid putting press releases on the newswire. Putting a news release on the newswire is still a common and costly mistake that many companies make. It's one that will result in little value with regards to the goal of the press release as a positioning tool. Google's latest algorithm ignores press releases distributed via the newswire, so there is little, if any, SEO value in doing this. Additionally, a newswire distribution, particularly one with a wide net target such as the entire U.S., can quickly become very expensive, especially if the release is over 400 words, as newswire services charge more for longer releases. So in general, it's a best practice to avoid using the newswire for positioning releases. In summary, the goal of a release distribution strategy is to create a regular cadence of relevant information for the influencers who can publish the release or include the information in a roundup story. In a digital PR strategy, a positioning release is a great way to go to fill in the natural editorial gaps that will happen as your product introduction cycles dictate when to send official new product announcements via a press release. Thanks for listening.